That club was probably 5 years, and then I transitioned into another club that was a little bit higher up on the scale in the pecking order, and then I think I spent a good 10 years in the club scene, and then I just was at that point where I didn't want to do it anymore.
You said higher up in the pecking order. What does that mean?
No, I'm not gonna talk about
Okay. All right.
that. Just higher up on the food chain.
I got you.
Yeah. My time in the military, I spent 8 years in the army. I was a track vehicle mechanic, so basically I worked on tanks or whatever the army wanted you to work on. I did my basic training in Fort Dix, New Jersey, and then from there I went to Aberdeen, Maryland for AIT, what we call Advanced Individual Training. So I learned to work on the tanks, and then from there the Gulf War was kicking off. It was starting, to start up while I was in basic. So I went to Germany for one day, got some shots, picked up some weapons, and ended up flying into I don't know, where did we fly? Saudi Arabia somewhere, and slept on the tarmac that night. And my unit came and picked me up, and I ended up in it was Cobalt Towers. Went through numerous Scud attacks and gas attacks that they attempted to put on us, and then ended up out in the desert and spending them 100 hours track mechanic. So we were attached to a tank unit, what they call a contact team. So I was able, when the tanks were moving, we were moving with them. So there was a few times that the Republican Guard tried to ambush us, and it was a crazy time. I remember doing, after the war was over, we were still in the desert in little encampments that we built, circle our vehicles together. We were doing guard duty with no ammunition. So being out in a foreign country in a hostile land with no ammunition because your leadership didn't want to give you bullets. Stuff that happens to you in the military, you don't realize, because the military, when I got out, they just put you out. They're like, all right, service is over, see you later. There's no integration therapy, or like, hey man, let's have you see, somebody to talk about anything that, to kind of evaluate where you are mentally. So you get out with this, on top of being Gen X and raised by fucking some asshole boomers, I mean, that's just what they were, then now you're in the military being trained by a bunch of boomers, right? So everything is like, push the feelings down, you can't talk about it, you're fucking soft. If you complain or anything, you're a slacker. So now you get out in the world, and all this anger and energy that you had in the military, because you've been in war zones or whatever, when you get out, they don't tell you how to turn that off. So then you channel that at your kids or your wife or your girlfriends or just somebody out in society that you might have had a run-in with. You kind of, they kind of get the blunt end of that, if you want to say that, So you might lash out at somebody and not know what it is. And I think I carried that on for many, many years, up until about 2 years ago. How did I get started in tattooing? So when I was 17, I was in high school, and I was already airbrushing and painting on clothes and painting on bicycles, like BMX bikes for the neighborhood and friends. And one of my homies was like, hey, the Cholos, man, my SA buddies are doing tattoos, let's go get one. So I went and got tattooed, and man, it was like an epiphany, like, wow, this is crazy. You can put pictures on people, man, draw on their skin. And ever since then I was like, this is what I want to do. But I was in the process of joining the military, so what better place to get exposed to tattooing is the military. So I ended up, I told my mom first I want to be a tattooer. She was like, yeah, absolutely not, because you're talking 89, 90, time frame. It was mainly, in California, bikers and gangbangers and drug dealers, they had all the tattoos. It wasn't like a norm that, like people see now. So joined the military and then started getting tattooed and talking to shops, trying to get an apprenticeship. How do I get into the industry? Like, how do I get into this? So they were explaining about you need an apprenticeship. And again, this is just 30 years ago, so it was definitely a rougher time, going into shops and getting thrown out. And so did my military career, started collecting tattoos, and then once I got out, I ended up in Atlanta and ran into a guy that was willing to teach me, so I got up under him and started my apprenticeship. That's pretty much how I got into it. Well, other artwork, as you can see on the walls, I don't know if you can see it in the camera, automotive painting and pinstriping is mainly and airbrushing on like motorcycle helmets or whatever somebody wants me to airbrush on. But that's my other outlet as far as artwork goes. It's definitely pinstriping and hot rod paint and that kind of culture of that automotive paint and airbrushing. That's what I like to do. If I'm going to do anything artwork in my spare time, that's definitely what it's going to be. So you gotta always work on yourself, man. I tell people that all the time. Work on your inner self, because if you're not right or you're not calm, everybody around you is gonna feel that, or they're not gonna be calm. And if you can't, you gotta love yourself first. If you don't love yourself, you can't love nobody else or anybody that you deal with.